When my son Eric was 1 year old, we were visiting my family in Mexico, and Eric was with several of my relatives in the dining room. I have a large family, and the dining room table is a round table that sits 8 people. I was in a separate room, but when I joined them, I found a very interesting scene. Eric was standing on top of a chair, and in front of him, sitting around the table, were all my relatives, spellbound. This is because 1-year-old Eric was giving them a long and serious speech. Mind you, he was babbling in his own baby language, but he was dead serious. If somebody dared to interrupt or laugh, he would point at him with his finger and rebuke him with a loud, "Ah!" He had total control of his audience. Even though he was only 1 year old, his intuition told him that this rough crowd was in need of a leader, and he was not shy to take on the job. Today we celebrate the feast of Christ the King. It is the last Sunday of the liturgical year, and through it we have followed the salvation story that culminates with today's celebration. Christ ruling as King of all creation. In the Gospel, we hear how, at the end of times, Christ will come in all his glory. We hear how he will separate the sheep from the goats, and how he will recognize one from the other based on rather simple criteria: the works of mercy that each of us performed, based on how much we lived a life of love. When we hear today's Gospel, we naturally find the association to Christ the King, because in the passage, Jesus is shown sitting upon his throne and passing judgment on the nations. But there is another, more subtle imagery also related to Christ's kingly role, and that is ourselves. We are the nations gathered before the throne of God, and Christ is separating us as sheep or goats, as kings in glory or as slaves to sin. When we were baptized, we were configured to Christ, and in Christ we too are kings. But what is a king? A king is not someone who bosses people around. That is a misconstrued notion of kingship. A nation does not exist to serve a king. A king is named to serve his nation. Authority and power are not the goals of a king, but his tools, since a king is, above all, a servant. A king fights the battles for his people. A king is always at the front line. A king watches over the weak. And as baptized, Christ has provided us with all the weapons we need to perform our kingly mission. As Paul tells us, Christ provides us with the armor of God, the sword of his word, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith. Be the king you were born to be. Defend his kingdom, your kingdom. To the hungry and the thirsty, satisfy them with food and drink, but also cut off the chains of his burdens with the sword of his word. To the stranger and the naked, welcome and dress them, but also cover them with a breastplate of righteousness. To the ill and imprisoned, visit them, but also soothe them under the shield of faith. I say again, be the king you were born to be. For even a 1-year-old knows when it is time to take on the job.